Let's talk about emotions. You know, emotions are like the air that we breathe. They're just part of everyday life. They're around us all the time. And emotions are also part of the Christian life. But a lot of times Christians, we don't know what to make of our emotions, what to do with them, and how they relate to our pursuit of God. So I want to share with you three things about emotions. Number one is simply an acknowledgement that emotions can be confusing. Now, it's great when you're feeling joyful or content or affectionate or ecstatic about things, but there are these other emotions in life that are uncomfortable, that are difficult, that can be very intense and even scary to experience. Things like anger and fear and sadness. And so often we label those as negative emotions because we don't like to feel them, because they can do harm in people's lives around us if we express them the wrong ways. And yet, the perspective that we're taking today is that God created all of the emotions, that emotions themselves are neither good or bad, they're neutral, but they can certainly be expressed for good or for bad, and certainly they can have good or bad consequences in our lives or in our relationships. Now, what we want to address in this point is how often Christians can be confused about emotions and what the role our feelings play in our pursuit of God. And what does it mean for our feelings to say that we're mature Christians? How does maturity play out in our emotional life? Because a lot of times we've been taught that Christians should only feel the positive emotions. And if you're feeling fear, it's because you're not trusting God enough. If you're feeling anger, it's because you're not walking in the Spirit. You're not exhibiting the fruit of the Spirit. If you're feeling sadness, what you should be feeling is the joy of the Lord. And so as a result, a lot of times what we'll do is stuff these emotions, we'll deny them, sweep them under the rug, put on a mask to cover up our emotions. And yet, by contrast, the Bible is very open about the expression of human emotions. For example, take a look at Psalm 42. Day and night I have only tears for food, while my enemies continually taunt me, saying, "Where is this God of yours?" My heart is breaking as I remember how it used to be. Why am I discouraged? Why is my heart so sad? Verse 9, my God, my rock, I cry, why have you forgotten me? Why must I wander around in grief, oppressed by my enemies? Now, as you look at those verses, you see sorrow, regret, you see depression, discouragement, shame. He's disturbed within and he feels abandoned by God, and he's not afraid to express that openly and process that openly. And yet, many Christians think that the Christian life really consists of what you believe and what you do, just beliefs and actions. And so it's hard to understand then, how do our feelings fit into that concept of the Christian life? Now, I admit that many Christians also, on the other hand, follow their emotions in an unhealthy and extreme and unbiblical way. But many of us err on the other side, where we're stuffing and denying those, and we're hiding our emotions behind a mask, even a mask from God. I want to encourage you that there's a more healthy way to process these difficult emotions that we feel. But before we talk more about that, I want to introduce our second point. I want you to think differently about these challenging feelings that we have. So secondly, I want you to understand that so-called negative emotions can actually be positive. First of all, if you take a look at emotions in the Bible, you see that even God expresses emotions. And not just compassion and love, but God expresses even the ones we think of as negative. In Deuteronomy 9, it says that God got angry at his people. And in Psalm 78, it talks about how God was grieved, God was sorrowful over his people. Now, God's emotions are going to be different than ours because he's a different kind of being, but he's still an emotive being in Scripture. And then think about Jesus. Jesus is the ideal human being. He's fully God, but he's also fully human in every way except he never sinned. And the Bible portrays Jesus experiencing a whole range, a whole spectrum of human emotions. For example, look at Mark chapter 3, verse 5. He looked around at them angrily and was deeply saddened by their hard hearts. Jesus experienced anger. And then in Matthew chapter 26, it says that he became anguished and distressed. He told them, my soul is crushed with grief to the point of death. So Jesus experienced real grief. And what we learn then from Jesus' anger, from Jesus' grief, is that we can experience emotions and express emotions without necessarily falling into sin. It's not necessarily sin to feel anger. In fact, anger can be the emotion that God uses to get you off your rear to do something that you need to do, to act against injustice or to protect someone. It's not necessarily a sin to feel fear. Fear can be an appropriate emotion to help us to stay away from a dangerous situation. See, it's what you do with your emotion after you feel it that counts. You can allow fear to keep you from sharing your faith with others, from mentoring someone or serving in a ministry, or from giving generously to God's work. Or you can allow fear to take you into deeper dependence on God as you obey Him. It's not necessarily a sin to feel sadness. Jesus felt sadness over people's response to God. Sadness can be a sign that you deeply care about other people. So now, with all this background that we've been studying about emotion, I want you to think next about what do we actually do with our emotions when they arise. And here's our third point, that you can take ownership of your emotions. There's 3 ways to do that. First of all, experience them. It's a mistake to deny or to bury your emotions. The Bible gives us plenty of examples of people openly experiencing and expressing their emotions. We already saw that in Psalm 42. And then the second way to take ownership of your emotions is to reflect on them. And again, back in Psalm 42, we see David thinking about, evaluating his emotions from a God-centered perspective. Look at verses 9 and 11. O God, my rock, I cry, why have you forgotten me? Why must I wander about in grief, oppressed by my enemies? In verse 11, why am I discouraged? Why is my heart so sad? So David is asking in these verses, where are these emotions coming from? That's a great question to ask, because God can use our emotions to get our attention, to teach us about ourselves. He can use them to reveal things about our inner life, about the life of our soul that lies beneath the surface that we might not be very aware of. And so when those emotions come, instead of running away from them or hiding them, we start asking questions about them. We start asking God, help me understand where that fear came from. What triggered that anger in me? Why do I get so impatient with things throughout the day? Why do certain people annoy me so much? So we spend time with God, talking to Him about our heart and about our life in response to our emotions. And then there's a third way that we can take ownership of our emotions, and that is to respond to our feelings in a way that honors God. Here's what I mean by that. Here's how that works. That's where I say, yes, I am feeling afraid or timid or anxious. And God is using that to show me some things about myself. But in the meantime, I'm going to choose to be obedient to God no matter how I feel. I'm not denying the fear. I'm not stuffing it under the rug, but I am still choosing to be obedient even though I feel afraid. Or, man, I'm feeling discouraged. I'm feeling disappointed right now. And God is using that to show me a window into my soul. But I'm going to choose then to hang on to the things that I know are true about God, even though I'm not feeling them right now. That's how we can respond to our feelings in a way that honors God. Now, if you're a follower of Jesus, then I hope you see that you don't have to be discouraged, you don't have to be confused, you don't have to be intimidated by your feelings, even the negative ones. You can experience them fully, you can reflect on them, you can learn from them as God works deep change and transformation in your soul. That's how emotions work in the Christian life.